the Tic-Tac UFO Encounter. In November 2004, off the coast of Southern California, the USS Princeton, part of the U.S. Navy's carrier Strike Group 11, detected an unknown object moving erratically over the Pacific Ocean. The radar contact had been appearing intermittently over several days, hovering at 80,000 feet before plunging towards sea level in under 2 seconds. On November 14th, Commander David Fravor, a seasoned FA-18 Super Hornet pilot, was dispatched to investigate. What followed would become one of the most perplexing encounters in modern military history. Fravor's jet approached the location reported by radar, just off the coast near San Clemente Island. There, hovering above the ocean in calm daylight, was a smooth, oblong object, roughly 40 feet long, white in color, and shaped like a tic-tac mint. It had no visible wings, no rotors, no exhaust trail. The ocean beneath it was visibly disturbed, as though something massive had submerged below. When Fravor tried to close in, the object abruptly shot upward and vanished from view, reappearing seconds later on the radar over 60 miles away. The capabilities of this craft defied conventional physics. Based on radar and pilot observations, the object demonstrated acceleration beyond 100 Gs, moved without generating sonic booms, and exhibited controlled flight with no visible means of propulsion. The USS Princeton's SPY-1 radar system, designed to track high-speed ballistic threats, failed to classify the object. A second jet, equipped with an advanced FLIR, forward-looking infrared pod, managed to capture video footage showing the object darting erratically, stopping, rotating, and zipping off screen at impossible speeds. The encounter was immediately reported up the chain of command. According to leaked Pentagon documents and witness interviews, the incident was classified and excluded from public reporting channels. Several of the personnel involved later testified that their flight data and radar tapes were confiscated by unknown individuals shortly after the event. Some were ordered to never speak of the incident again. In 2017, the video footage, known today as the FLIR-1 or Tic-Tac video, was officially released by the U.S. Department of Defense. Yet even with public confirmation, no satisfactory explanation has ever been provided. Aerospace experts, physicists, and military analysts alike have reviewed the encounter and concluded that no known aircraft, drone, or atmospheric phenomenon matches the behavior recorded. If the object was a foreign adversary's test vehicle, it represented a technological leap generations ahead of any known propulsion system. If it was not man-made, then it challenges our fundamental understanding of motion, energy, and control in aerospace environments. The most unsettling detail is not the encounter itself, but the complete absence of follow-up or disclosure. There are no known recovery efforts, no public investigation, and no mention of the object's origin. This was not a myth. This was not a hallucination. This was a multi-platform, multi-witness military incident recorded by radar, infrared optics, and human eyes. And yet, its implications remain locked behind classified doors. If the skies above the Pacific were host to something beyond our understanding, the silence that followed speaks louder than the encounter itself. The Tehran Dogfight Incident. On the night of September 18, 1976, the skies above Tehran, Iran, became the stage for one of the most chilling military confrontations with an unknown aerial object ever documented. Iranian air defense units, under the command of General Nader Yousefi, began receiving calls from civilians reporting a bright object hovering over the city. Initially dismissed as a misidentified star, or perhaps a satellite, the phenomenon escalated when radar systems at Mehrabad International Airport confirmed an object stationary at high altitude, radiating a luminous intensity brighter than any known aircraft. At approximately 12:30 a.m., a Phantom F-4 fighter jet was scrambled from Cherokee Air Force Base to intercept. As the aircraft approached the object, all of its instruments, radar, communications, and weapons control, suddenly malfunctioned. The pilot was forced to return to base. A second F-4, piloted by Major Parviz Jafari, was launched shortly after. As he closed in, he described the object as a pulsating orb emitting intense red, blue, green, and orange lights. Suddenly, a smaller glowing object detached from the main craft and accelerated toward his jet. In response, Jafari attempted to fire an AIM-9 Sidewinder missile. At that exact moment, his weapons control panel failed entirely. The smaller object broke off pursuit just before impact, returning to the primary craft. Jafari regained control and circled back, only to witness a second luminous object descend from the main body and land softly in the desert outside Tehran. When he returned to base, his instruments returned to normal function, as if nothing had happened. The next day, a recovery team was dispatched to the landing site. According to internal communications later declassified by the U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency, DIA, nothing was recovered, but electromagnetic interference in the area persisted for days. The event was thoroughly documented in a U.S. intelligence memo titled Iran Reported Unidentified Object, which was circulated among the NSA, CIA, and USAF. Notably, the report highlighted the excellent capabilities of the Iranian pilots and radar operators, emphasizing that their accounts were credible and technically precise. Despite being an officially acknowledged incident, no country has claimed ownership of the object. Its behavior, deactivating aircraft systems remotely, dispatching smaller controlled probes, and emitting radiant energy without heat signature, has no known technological equivalent. The possibility of electronic warfare was considered but quickly ruled out due to the sophistication and scope of the interference. To this day, Major Jafari's testimony stands firm. He later rose to the rank of general and has repeated his account in interviews and at conferences, including presentations to international UFO research panels. His career and reputation have remained intact, lending further weight to the credibility of the encounter. What makes this event uniquely disturbing is not only the advanced maneuverability and systems disruption, but the deliberate act of defense, something resembling intelligent response. The object did not flee when approached. It reacted, it deployed, it disabled, and when it was done, it simply vanished into the sky, leaving behind no trace but a broken silence and a government report stamped with quiet alarm. The skies over Tehran that night hosted more than a mystery. They may have revealed a technology far beyond our own, one that chose to demonstrate its power, not to destroy, but to remind those watching that control does not always belong to the ones with missiles. The Bentwaters radar trace. In December 1980, a series of events unfolded in the dense forests surrounding RAF Bentwaters and RAF Woodbridge, two joint US-UK air bases in Suffolk, England, that would later be known as Britain's most credible military UFO encounter. Though the public remembers it as the Rendlesham Forest incident, few know that amid the forest sightings, a lesser-known but critical anomaly occurred, on radar. In the early hours of December 28th, radar technicians at RAF Bentwaters noticed a blip hovering above the forest perimeter, just outside the base's secured airspace. It was holding perfectly still, then accelerating abruptly in straight lines before making right-angle turns without slowing. At its peak, it reached speeds estimated at over 4,000 miles per hour, far beyond any known aircraft, and well above what even modern stealth drones are capable of. According to logs recovered years later, the object would stop, shift position laterally, and then vanish, entirely from radar before reappearing moments later, miles away. The anomaly coincided with multiple ground sightings by U.S. Air Force personnel stationed at the base. On the same night, several airmen, including Lieutenant Colonel Charles Halt, witnessed a glowing object maneuvering silently between the trees. Halt recorded audio during the incident, in which he described beams of light descending into the weapons storage area. None of the men were able to determine the origin or structure of the object, but all confirmed that it emitted no sound and moved with unnatural precision. The radar trace became a key piece of internal documentation. A classified report later compiled by the U.S. Air Force mentioned the object as a high-speed, low-signature aerial presence inconsistent with known flight capabilities. The event was quietly reviewed by personnel with security clearances far above the local base command. Shortly after, witnesses were separated and individually debriefed. According to former servicemen, some were threatened with court-martial if they discussed what they saw. Photographs taken at the site mysteriously vanished from base archives. Several tapes of radar recordings were reportedly collected by a team flown in from Germany under orders from U.S. European Command. These materials were never seen again. Years later, when portions of the case were declassified, the radar data was conspicuously absent. Unlike previous UFO cases dismissed for lack of evidence, this incident included real-time radar tracking, trained military witnesses, physical landing traces, and a corresponding radio log. The data, if preserved, would be among the most valuable records of unexplainable aerial behavior in military history. And yet, the reaction was not to investigate further. It was to erase. The official response labeled it as a series of misinterpreted lights from a nearby lighthouse, despite the vast discrepancies in the distance, trajectory, and appearance. The radar readings were never addressed. If a craft truly hovered over a nuclear-capable airbase in the UK, moved in ways that defied aerodynamics, and was seen by multiple officers and recorded on radar, then either the world witnessed an act of impossible technology, or the cover story itself is the real event. The silence is not proof of nothing happening. It is proof that something did, and that someone ensured it would never be explained. The Japan Air Defense Radar Anomaly. In the early morning hours of May 3, 1977, Japan's Air Self-Defense Force, JASDF, radar station in Wajima, Ishikawa Prefecture, recorded an unidentified aerial phenomenon that has never been fully explained. Positioned along the Sea of Japan, this installation was responsible for monitoring potential incursions during the height of the Cold War. That morning, the radar systems detected a contact entering Japanese airspace at an altitude of 30,000 feet, moving at a velocity that no known aircraft could achieve, estimated at over 22,000 miles per hour. Operators at the station were initially convinced the reading was a malfunction. The contact had no transponder code, emitted no radio frequency, and showed no heat plume. But within minutes, secondary radar at Komatsu Air Base and another civilian station confirmed the object's presence. The blip zigzagged across the screen, shifting course at right angles without deceleration. One operator would later describe it as a bullet-making chess moves. A pair of Mitsubishi F-1 interceptor jets was dispatched. They reached the area within minutes, but saw nothing in the skies. Visual contact was impossible, though the object continued to appear on ground radar. In a last attempt to track it, a P-3C Orion surveillance plane was launched with infrared sensors. The aircraft recorded no thermal signature and detected no electromagnetic emissions in the vicinity of the anomaly. The object simply disappeared from radar at the exact moment the Orion entered the sector. Japan's Ministry of Defense filed the incident internally, labeling it as undetermined airspace violation. No public statements were made, and the few officers involved were rotated out of their posts within months. But decades later, a redacted segment of a Cold War intelligence sharing document, obtained through U.S. FOIA requests, revealed a footnote about an aerial target traversing Japanese defense corridors with non-ballistic motion exceeding Mach 25. The note added, not attributable to Soviet or American platforms. What puzzled analysts most was the lack of physical evidence. At 22,000 miles per hour, the object should have produced enormous sonic booms and atmospheric disturbance. Yet, none were detected. There were no temperature spikes, no audible disruptions, no waveforms on seismographs. It had the speed of a re-entry vehicle, but none of the telltale trails or friction heat. Some speculated that the anomaly might have been a meteor or space debris, but those would have followed predictable trajectories and left behind burn traces. This object maneuvered. It changed direction at angles no known object under inertia could achieve. Others suggested high-altitude electronic jamming, but this theory failed under the weight of triple-station radar confirmation and the lack of corresponding signal interference. The true nature of the 1977 radar anomaly remains buried under layers of classified silence. No official photographs exist. No pilot ever saw it. It was real only on the screens of machines designed to detect threats. Then it was gone. For an object to violate the airspace of a major ally without consequence, and for that object to move in ways that physics should not allow, is not merely a mystery. It's a direct challenge to the limits of what defense systems can even perceive. The question is not how it moved. It is who, or what, had the ability to move like that and disappear without a trace. The Minot AFB UFO Report. On October 24, 1968, at approximately 3:00 a.m., security teams at Minot Air Force Base in North Dakota began receiving reports of an unidentified flying object maneuvering near the base's missile silos. Minot AFB was home to a vast network of Minuteman ICBMs, forming a critical part of America's nuclear deterrent. That night, multiple airmen across separate locations witnessed a glowing object hovering silently in the sky, and what followed would become one of the most heavily documented yet officially ignored encounters in U.S. military history. The object was first reported by a missile security team near Launch Facility Oscar 7. They described a large, luminous sphere pulsating with amber and white light, floating just above the tree line. At nearly the same time, radar control inside the base tower confirmed an unknown contact matching the same position and altitude. Its behavior was erratic. It hovered for several minutes, descended slowly toward the ground, then abruptly ascended and darted off at a sharp angle before stopping again mid-air. An airborne B-52 bomber conducting training exercises in the region was redirected to approach the area of activity. As the bomber closed in, its radar systems picked up an object pacing the aircraft at high speed, matching its trajectory, but holding an offset distance of just 1 mile. Flight logs recorded that the object maintained this position despite the B-52 changing speed and altitude. At one point, the object rapidly accelerated past the plane, vanishing from view, only to reappear seconds later behind it. The crew on board the B-52 witnessed the craft visually, a glowing circular object, roughly the size of a car, completely silent and without any apparent propulsion. Onboard instruments, including the plane's onboard radar and electromagnetic systems, experienced intermittent failure during the close encounter. Later, as the aircraft returned to base, ground control confirmed that the object had been tracked, descending into a field near the missile complex. Air Force personnel were dispatched to the location, but no wreckage or evidence was found. The grass was flattened in a circular pattern approximately 60 feet in diameter, but no burn marks or radiation traces were detected. What stands out in this case is the sheer number of independent confirmations. Multiple ground witnesses, radar recordings, and flight crew testimony all corroborated the event. Following standard protocol, the incident was logged and reported to the Office of Special Investigations, OSI. Shortly after, all materials related to the case, including radar data, voice recordings, and written statements, were collected and classified. Several involved personnel reported being instructed to never discuss the event, and some were transferred within days of the encounter. In 1979, a portion of the report was declassified, revealing a summary of the B-52 radar contact and pilot statements. However, the most detailed materials, radar plots, cockpit recordings, and tower logs, remain inaccessible. The official position maintains that no extraordinary event occurred, but the Minot incident continues to defy explanation. A silent, maneuverable object, tracked by multiple military-grade systems, capable of hovering over a nuclear facility, and pacing a strategic bomber, was dismissed without investigation or resolution. The implications are far-reaching. Either an adversary demonstrated unimaginable aerial capabilities over a key U.S. missile base, or something not of this world briefly asserted its presence in the most guarded airspace on Earth. And then it vanished, taking its secrets with it, along with any possibility of open inquiry. The silence that followed was not ignorance. It was policy. The Malmstrom Silo Shutdown. On March 24, 1967, at Malmstrom Air Force Base in Montana, something extraordinary occurred deep beneath the plains, something that shook the foundation of U.S. nuclear command. That morning, Oscar Flight, a group of 10 underground launch silos housing Minuteman ICBMs, went completely offline. Without warning and without any apparent technical cause, the missiles simultaneously became non-operational. They could not be launched. They could not be controlled. They had, in the military's terms, been rendered useless. Captain Robert Salas, the deputy missile crew commander stationed in the underground control center, received a panicked call from a guard topside. The man reported strange lights in the sky directly above the silo gates, bright, glowing red objects hovering silently. Moments later, all 10 missiles registered a no-go status. These launch systems were isolated, heavily shielded, and triple redundant. The odds of a complete simultaneous failure were statistically impossible. Salas immediately contacted his commanding officer, and security teams were dispatched to the surface. Upon arrival, they confirmed that an unidentified object had been seen hovering over the facility. The lights moved in erratic, silent patterns before vanishing into the sky. Technical crews later examined the missile systems and found no sign of tampering, no electrical surges, and no hardware damage. The systems had simply shut down, then gradually returned to normal hours later, as if nothing had occurred. The Air Force conducted an internal investigation, later documented in a report known as the Echo Flight Incident, a near-identical event that had occurred just days earlier at another flight near Malmstrom. In both cases, the shutdowns were unexplained, and in both, UFO activity had been reported simultaneously. Despite the gravity of the situation, nuclear weapons being rendered inert during a time of geopolitical tension, no external alerts were issued, no public statements were made, and the events were buried under layers of classification. Years later, Salas would testify under oath about the incident, appearing before government panels and UFO disclosure hearings. He produced declassified documents confirming the missile shutdown and linking it to unexplained aerial activity. Yet, the official position remained unchanged. The system failure had no definitive cause. For decades, this event has haunted military analysts. How could an object, unarmed, undetected, and unannounced, render a fleet of ICBMs inoperable with no physical contact? Some speculated about electromagnetic pulse weapons, but EMPs cause permanent damage and are detectable. These missiles were disabled and then mysteriously re-enabled, almost as if to demonstrate control rather than destruction. This was not an act of war. It was an act of precision interference, carried out in complete silence and aimed directly at the heart of nuclear deterrence. The fact that it occurred without retaliation, or even recognition, suggests not only technological superiority, but psychological strategy. To this day, the question remains: what force has the capability to reach into the most secure facilities on Earth and flip the switch on humanity's most powerful weapons? And more disturbingly, why did it choose to do so? The Aguadilla Airport infrared object. On April 25, 2013, a U.S. Customs and Border Protection aircraft was preparing to land at Rafael Hernandez Airport in Aguadilla, Puerto Rico. As the flight crew approached the runway around 9:20 p.m., they noticed a strange object flying low over the ocean, directly crossing into the airport's airspace. It had no navigation lights, no transponder code, and no radio signal. Curious and concerned, the crew activated their onboard infrared camera system, and what they recorded has baffled analysts ever since. The infrared footage, later leaked and authenticated by the Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies, SCU, shows a spherical object flying at speeds estimated between 80 to 100 miles per hour at low altitude. It maintained a consistent trajectory just above the ocean's surface and exhibited flight characteristics that defied explanation. The object emitted no heat signature and showed no visible means of propulsion. It moved in a fluid, almost gliding motion, unaffected by air resistance or drag. The most shocking moment came nearly 2 minutes into the footage. As the object approached the water, it did not decelerate or change angle. Instead, it plunged directly into the ocean without causing a splash, wave, or thermal disturbance, an impossibility under the laws of hydrodynamics. Seconds later, the object re-emerged from the water, briefly flew at the same altitude, then appeared to split into 2 identical spheres, both continuing on the same path before disappearing from view. The radar tower at the airport confirmed no conventional aircraft in the area, and the object's flight path did not correspond with any known flight corridors. There was no record of foreign drones, weather balloons, or military activity in the region. The U.S. government has never officially acknowledged the event, nor commented on the footage. Independent analysis of the video revealed further anomalies. Experts noted that the object's speed remained constant despite wind changes, and it maneuvered around terrain with a precision suggesting advanced situational awareness. The lack of infrared exhaust trail ruled out traditional jet or propeller propulsion. The seamless entry into water without splash or bubble trail defied known physics, particularly given the speed and density differential between air and ocean. The incident took place near a coastline populated with U.S. military facilities, raising concerns about whether the object was surveilling or even probing American infrastructure. Yet, despite its implications, there was no emergency response, no airspace closure, and no public alert. It was as if the event never happened, except it did, and the footage remains irrefutable. What makes the Aguadilla incident unique is the uninterrupted nature of the recording, the high-fidelity thermal imagery, and the clear sequence of events captured in real time. Unlike other cases, this one offers hard visual evidence, yet no one in official capacity seems interested in explaining it. If a craft can move through air and water seamlessly, emit no heat, split into multiple objects, and remain undetected by conventional radar, then we are either witnessing a breakthrough in human-made surveillance technology or encountering something entirely outside our sphere of understanding. And if it is the latter, the silence surrounding this event may speak to something even more unsettling, that we are being observed not from above, but from just beneath the surface. The USS Omaha Transmedium sphere. On July 15, 2019, the USS Omaha, an advanced littoral combat ship stationed off the coast of San Diego, became the center of an encounter that has since raised fundamental questions about the nature of our technological understanding. At approximately 11 p.m., the ship's radar systems detected multiple unknown aerial vehicles operating in restricted airspace. These objects, tracked over a period of several minutes, displayed erratic flight paths, sudden accelerations, and the ability to hover without any visible propulsion systems. What set this incident apart was not merely the radar contacts, it was the visual confirmation. Infrared video recorded from the ship's Combat Information Center captured one of the objects in chilling clarity. A perfectly spherical craft, dark against the thermal background, moving silently above the ocean's surface. It exhibited no rotors, no wings, no exhaust, and no variation in heat emission. The crew monitored it as it maintained a steady altitude and speed, maneuvering with a smoothness no drone or aircraft could replicate. Then, without warning, the sphere dropped vertically into the ocean. It made no splash, no spray, no visible impact. The water remained undisturbed on the surface. The radar lost contact momentarily, only to regain a submerged signal seconds later. The object had not vanished. It had transitioned. Attempts to locate the sphere using submarine sensors and sonar were unsuccessful. The Navy deployed a search team, including a nearby submarine and unmanned underwater vehicles. They found nothing, no debris, no propulsion trail, no thermal residue. The ocean had swallowed the object, and the sea kept its silence. This event was documented in the ship's classified incident log and later corroborated by multiple sailors, radar technicians, and electronic warfare officers. The footage was eventually leaked and authenticated by the Pentagon, which acknowledged the video as real but declined to offer any explanation. The term used by internal analysts was transmedium vehicle, a craft capable of operating seamlessly through air and water, without mechanical transition or performance degradation. Engineers have pointed out that moving through different mediums requires radically different design principles. Water is denser than air by several magnitudes, requiring streamlined shapes, propulsion adjustments, and reinforced structures to maintain maneuverability. The sphere showed none of these adaptations, yet performed flawlessly in both environments. If the object was man-made, then it represents a leap not just in aviation or submarine technology, but in the fundamental understanding of material science, energy conversion, and hydrodynamics. No current nation has disclosed any platform remotely resembling such capabilities. More disturbingly, the USS Omaha incident is not isolated. Similar sightings of transmedium objects have been reported near U.S. naval exercises for over a decade, but most remain classified or dismissed without investigation. The silence is systemic, the implications overwhelming. A craft that can enter and exit the ocean without disturbance, resist detection, and defy structural expectations is not just a mystery, it is a threat to the very framework of defense planning. The question is not what it is, but why it keeps appearing near strategic military assets, as if it already knows exactly what we are doing and how far behind we are. The Chilean Navy FLIR Encounter. On November 11, 2014, a Chilean Navy helicopter conducting a routine patrol mission over the coastal region between San Antonio and Santiago recorded what would become one of the most baffling thermal imaging cases in modern history. The mission, part of a daytime surveillance operation by a four-man crew aboard an Airbus Cougar AS-532, was meant to monitor traffic and weather conditions. But at 1:52 p.m., the infrared camera operator noticed a distant object moving parallel to the helicopter's flight path, at the same altitude and speed, but with no visible structure. The helicopter crew attempted to establish contact with air traffic control, requesting information on any known aircraft in the vicinity. There were none. Radar stations also failed to detect any object in the area, despite the fact that it was clearly visible through the helicopter's FLIR, forward-looking infrared system. The object maintained a horizontal trajectory at an altitude of approximately 4,500 feet and a velocity near 250 miles per hour. It did not emit any transponder signal, a violation of Chilean aviation protocols. But the most unsettling moment occurred around the 8-minute mark of the recording. The object released two distinct plumes of material, streams of high-temperature substance visible only in infrared. These emissions were not contrails or exhaust. They dissipated irregularly and left no visual trace in the standard optical spectrum. To the naked eye, the sky appeared empty. The Chilean Navy submitted the footage and mission report to CUFOA, the country's government-run Committee for the Study of Anomalous Aerial Phenomena. Over 2 years, the committee, composed of aviation experts, meteorologists, physicists, and military analysts, attempted to identify the object. They ruled out commercial aircraft, weather balloons, drones, and atmospheric anomalies. The thermal behavior and flight pattern did not match any known civilian or military vehicle. The committee's final verdict, released publicly in 2017, concluded that the object was not any known aircraft or natural phenomenon. Unlike many governments, Chile chose not to suppress the case but to acknowledge it as unexplained. The infrared footage was made public, showing in full detail the object's consistent motion and the bizarre discharge event. Theories range from experimental stealth technology to advanced surveillance platforms, yet none explain the thermal signatures or the absence of radar detection. The object showed no wings, no rotors, no surface movement, and it never changed velocity during the nearly 10-minute encounter. It defied mechanical logic. What made this case even more credible was the context. The Chilean military, unlike many other national forces, has no institutional stigma against investigating aerial anomalies. This was not a report from amateurs. It was a direct military recording, handled through official channels, reviewed by qualified experts, and released transparently. Despite all that, the mystery remains. What kind of aircraft can emit heat without combustion? How can it fly without lift surfaces or propulsion? Why was it invisible to radar but clearly present on thermal optics? And why, if the incident is so well documented, has there been no global effort to study it further? If the Chilean Navy's encounter had occurred over American or Russian airspace, it might have vanished into a vault of secrecy. But even when a government chooses to reveal what it cannot explain, the rest of the world turns away. Perhaps it is not the evidence that is lacking, but the willingness to face what that evidence suggests. The Nimitz radar jamming reports. In the early 2000s, during a series of training exercises off the coast of Southern California, the U.S. Navy's Carrier Strike Group 11 began experiencing a troubling pattern, one that went largely unreported until years later. While the Tic-Tac UFO incident from 2004 would capture the headlines, behind the scenes, sailors and technicians aboard the USS Nimitz and its escort ships began documenting strange and repeated instances of radar interference. These were not ordinary glitches. They were deliberate, intelligent, and surgically precise. The AN Spyway-1 radar systems onboard the Aegis-equipped vessels began picking up unknown targets, blips that would suddenly appear at high altitudes, descend in seconds to near sea level, then hover silently or dart away. These returns were not accompanied by any transponder signals, heat signatures, or communications. At first, the crew suspected electronic warfare training, but as the anomalies increased, the pattern became clear. The radars weren't just being confused, they were being manipulated. Electronics technicians noted that the jamming did not resemble typical scatter or signal overload. Instead, It mimicked known aircraft profiles just enough to be mistaken for real objects, until those objects performed impossible maneuvers, like stopping mid-air, ascending vertically at extreme speeds, or disappearing entirely from tracking. On several occasions, radar systems were completely disabled in a narrow cone, while surrounding systems remained fully functional. This kind of focused interference required real-time spatial awareness, something akin to an adaptive AI analyzing each ship's radar blind spots in real time. One fire controlman later described the phenomenon as someone playing chess with our sensors. The jamming would begin just before flight operations, shift across multiple frequencies, and evade every countermeasure the crew deployed. Attempts to trace the source failed. There were no aircraft in range, no submarines nearby, and no known adversary with that level of electromagnetic precision. Eventually, the anomalies were logged as part of routine after-action reports, then quietly sealed. When the Tic-Tac encounter occurred in 2004, many of the same radar technicians recognized the flight patterns and signal disruptions from previous encounters. But official briefings focused only on the visual and infrared evidence, ignoring months of accumulated sensor data. The interference was never explained. It simply became part of the background noise of the Pacific Training Theater. The implications are disturbing. Jamming military radar without detection is a profound breach of security. Doing it selectively, without collateral signal loss, and in coordination with physical aerial phenomena, suggests a level of control no known platform possesses. If it were a test by a domestic black program, why risk exposure near active duty carrier groups? If it were a foreign adversary, how did they avoid detection? And if it was neither, then who or what had the capability to enter the electromagnetic heart of the U.S. Navy and remain invisible? The most unsettling detail is that this wasn't a one-time event. It occurred over days, weeks, and possibly years, then vanished just as quietly. No official report has ever acknowledged the jamming as part of the larger UAP narrative, and those who worked in the radar rooms are left with memories of systems that should never have failed, blinking out one by one. Sometimes, the most terrifying encounter isn't the thing you see on a screen. It's the screen that goes dark. Conclusion. These 10 military encounters, recorded by radar, infrared optics, trained personnel, and flight systems, do not form a random assortment of anomalies. They reveal a consistent, deeply troubling pattern, a series of intelligent, coordinated intrusions into some of the most secure airspaces on Earth, all exhibiting behaviors and capabilities that defy known science. This is not folklore. These are not campfire stories. These are incidents extracted from official logs, cockpit recordings, and declassified reports, each one carefully documented and each one quietly buried. What links them is not just the presence of unknown technology, but the response to it. In every case, witnesses were silenced, data was classified, and public inquiries were deflected. From the deserts of Iran to the forests of England, from the depths off San Diego to the missile fields of Montana, the same choreography unfolds. Objects appear, display impossible maneuvers, interact with nuclear systems, or evade interception, and then vanish, followed swiftly by silence. The agencies involved, air forces, navies, intelligence commands, have access to the world's most advanced detection systems. These are not isolated malfunctions. They are encounters acknowledged internally, sometimes admitted publicly, but never pursued with transparency. Why? Because full disclosure would not only expose what was seen, it would expose what was never meant to be revealed. And the price of that silence is not merely institutional integrity. It is the potential loss of understanding technologies that could revolutionize propulsion, energy, and surveillance. If even one of these craft operates beyond the framework of known physics, then we are ignoring breakthroughs that could reshape our civilization. Instead, we lock away the footage, redact the names, and rotate the witnesses. The consequences are incalculable. What if the object over Malmstrom was not just observing, but testing our response systems? What if the sphere that plunged into the ocean near the USS Omaha wasn't alone, but part of something larger hidden beneath the waves? Each event hints at a deeper infrastructure, an intelligence not only capable of observing us, but of choosing when and how to appear. The pattern is clear. These are not isolated disturbances, but strategic demonstrations. They occur near military assets, near nuclear weapons, near surveillance radars. They are deliberate, they are measured, and they are ignored. Because the greatest threat is not that we are being watched. It is that we are being studied, and in that study, we remain silent. Not because we have no answers, but because the answers may be more dangerous than the questions themselves.